There are many times when you'll need to move your objects around in 3D space, and we do that by using the transform tools. Before we actually start transforming objects around, we need to know where we're going to be transforming them. We need to know a little bit about how 3D space works in Blender. So if I start orbiting my scene, you'll notice I have a little icon in the bottom corner of this screen, and I also have some green and red axes. And these just tell me where my X, Y, and Z axes are. Now, my Z axis is my vertical axis, which isn't showing up on my grid, but just know that Z is up and down, and X and Y move you left, right, and forward, back. So if I want to move an object, probably the easiest way to do that is to hit the translate key here in the Object Tools panel. I can also get to that by using the G hotkey. Now, G stands for grab. So if I were to right-click on an object, say the table, and hit G, notice how it turns white, and now I can translate that object. Now, I really don't know exactly where I'm translating. You can see in the bottom of the screen, it kind of has these numbers here of dx, dy, and dz, which kind of tell me where it's moving. But because I've got a 2D screen and a 3D space, I can't tell exactly whether I'm moving it left or right, or up and down, or back and forth. Probably the easier way to do this is to constrain the motion of the object. So if I were to hit the translate key again, and this time hit the X key, you'll notice how I can actually move it along the X axis. If I were to hit the Y key, notice how I can move it along Y, and the same for Z. You can move it along the Z axis. Now this is great because it allows you to constrain the way that the object moves. Now another way to get more constraint over the way an object moves is to use an orthographic viewport. So if I were to hit the number 7 key on my numpad, go to my top viewport, and then hit 5 to go to orthographic, then when I grab this object and move it, I'm basically only moving it in the XY plane because I'm looking straight down at it. I'm just rearranging it along the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back into perspective mode by just orbiting my camera and hitting the number 5. Now another way to move the object is to actually move it by discrete numbers. We can do this in a number of places. If I go over to my properties panel here and I hit object, you'll see that I have numbers here for translation. So I can move my X position here, my Y position here, or my Z position here. So for example, if I wanted it exactly at 0 in Z, I could just type 0 and it would go to 0. Now I can also get to these tools by bringing out the properties panel here. So if I want to, I have my object that's selected. Again, I can go X, Y, and Z. So those are two additional ways to transform objects. And that way you can also type in very precise numbers. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this here. One additional way to translate objects is to use the transform gizmo. And you can do this by going down to the bottom of your 3D viewport and clicking here. And what you want to be able to see here is this arrow, the curve, and this little scale tool here. But I want to make sure it's on the arrow. And when it's on the arrow, this little gizmo comes up and it allows me to just grab either the X, the Y, or the Z axis and move it. So if I hit the red glyph, I'm moving in X, green, I'm moving in Y, and blue, I'm moving in Z. Now I also can move multiple objects. All I have to do is just shift select them and I can move many objects at once. So those are some of the basics of how to translate objects within Blender.